Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. And it's my sincere hope John will be back next week and that he'll be at our session. Sort of can't imagine a session without him. So, but it's interesting a lot of times when we do leadership trainings, we do this exercise where you get people in a circle and without any warning, we ask them to give a 5-minute talk. And sometimes we give them the koan, and sometimes they just have to see which one arrives for them. And this sort of feels like that the last couple of weeks. It's almost like a Zen board game where John picks a card, and then I say, "Ooh, what might I do with this card?" And I imagine one of the lines in what he wrote this week was, "The body has its own trajectory," which was a very interesting take on how we're both intimately involved with this whole situation, and yet it seems it has endings in mind or difficulties in mind that we sometimes do not. And Zen always has a kind of obsession with death and crypts and dark. And, a friend of mine, when she jumped ship from traditional Zen and started studying with the Vipassana people for a while, her Zen group said, "You seem really happy." And she just sort of laughed and said, "Well, um, having a little more fun," which I don't think is true. But traditional Zen often holds. I have a friend who he used to be an abbot, and every night before he goes to sleep, he turns his cup over by his bed. And the idea is that that might be the very last time that he might not wake up in the morning to turn his cup over. And so every day when he wakes up, he's so relieved that he turns up his glass. And as I was thinking of that this morning, I was thinking of John in my head saying, "I don't know, seems a bit overdone, doesn't it?" And I thought, yeah, seems a bit overdone. But that somehow what we're learning to do, I think, by doing something like hanging out in the crypt, or even what gets us into this situation, seeking out the crypt, seeking out the ancestors, seeking out the dark night with no moon, seeking out the graveyard, is that we're trying to gain some proximity to the eternal. That when we're sitting anywhere, but that when we begin to come into relationship of any kind with the eternal, that everything spreads out, everything takes on a kind of vivid depth because of that proximity. And so many of the old Chinese masters, at least, I was thinking of the Pang family, who were a lay family, but certainly excelled in their insight. And there's one story in which Layman Pang and his daughter are both getting very old, and she's aware he's going to die soon. And she says, "Father, why don't you go take in the sunset? And, it's beautiful." And he goes out, and by the time he returns, she's gone. She's died. And he says, "Oh, that girl, she was always ahead of me." And then he dies. And there's this feeling that it's just the next step to go over. It begins to lose its tragedy. It's just a something, which doesn't mean that sorrow doesn't wash through us. But it loses that sense of it shouldn't happen. And on the Western side, we'd call this learning to get comfort with the Hadean side of life, with the underworld that somehow brings all the, Hades is the very richest of all the gods. and that his presence imbues everything with a kind of depth and mystery that somehow is inextricable from meaning. What comes to draw us down and in and toward the crypt, and really away from all the explanations and scheming and plans and ideas and anything that comes along with the day life. You feel like once you've entered that crypt, none of that is any good for your predicament. And in some way, the mind loves a good predicament because it keeps it busy, gives it all sorts of satisfaction to scheme and think about how it shouldn't have gotten in here and how it should be able to get out and whose fault it might be, and how it probably started when you were 4, and this is the result and whatever it is. But the longer you sit, it all just starts to wash away. The darkness just grows. And in some sense, I used to have a friend who was very convinced that she was a star being, and that this was just a temporary problem that could be overcome to get back to her real life in the galaxy and the stars and away from. So in some sense, the entire Earth had become a stone crypt to her. It was a place that she had been closed into and needed to get out. And you can see that in some way, absolutely anything can then become a crypt. Being stuck in traffic, being stuck with someone you don't like talking to, being stuck with someone who's ill who can't stop coughing, being stuck, like anything at all can somehow present itself to the mind as something that you need to get out of in order to be happy or free. And yet, Zen somehow has made its home by taking the very provocative position that absolutely nothing need be different for you to be free. No one need listen to you better. Your back need not feel any better. Your retirement account need not perform any better. Nothing need be different. And that freedom also is not any particular quality. It doesn't mean, therefore, I never worry, therefore, I'm deliriously happy, therefore, anything, but that it's a kind of spaciousness that just starts to infuse everything with a kind of integrity. Everything is allowed to be itself. There need not be a problem. I don't have to be happy about any of it, but it still gets to be there, and somehow happiness ekes in anyway. And I was thinking about, there's a really strange book called The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. And if you know Murakami at all, he has a kind of koan consciousness, because you just end up in these predicaments that you never expected. Like in this particular book, his cat goes missing. And first his wife goes missing, then his cat goes missing. But he starts with the cat because the wife doesn't seem like she wants to be found just yet. And along the way, he starts receiving mysterious phone calls from clairvoyants, and then he starts finding mysterious houses at the end of his street. And long story short, he finds himself at the bottom of this deep, dark well. It's a kind of crypt. And at first, he thinks this is a real problem because mostly what starts to happen is he gets in touch with his rage at his brother-in-law, which is his perfect shadow and his reason for blame of everything. Surely the reason the cat went missing, surely the reason his wife has gone missing. A problem for this mysterious caller. Apparently he's done something to her too, and all he can feel at the bottom of this well is rage and a kind of self-pity and all sorts of all the things that he didn't want to face in the upper world come to visit him once he's down inside the well. And I give you just a couple descriptions of what he says, because what happens throughout the book is his relationship to the well begins to change as he starts to as he starts to let it work on him. It eventually begins to leave a mark on his face, and the mark comes with certain healing properties. That when he encounters people in the outer world, this mark has a mysterious effect on them too. And I thought, yeah, that's about right. When you come to feel like you need not escape anywhere, no matter what's happening, you have the sense that you can meet it and that you can let it work on you. That does have a kind of mysterious healing effect on the people you encounter, the situations you encounter. They may not be able to tell it, but you can feel it. So first he says the well bottom is like the bottom of the sea. Things down here stay very still, keeping their original forms as if under tremendous pressure, unchanged from day to day. Which is true when you first go into the crypt. It just feels like everything is stuck. You have to get away. A round slice of light floats high above me, the evening sky. Looking up at it, I think about the October evening world where people must be going about their lives. Beneath that pale autumn light, they must be walking down streets, going to the store for things, preparing dinner, boarding trains for home. And they think, if they think at all, that these things are too obvious to think about, just as I used to do or not do. They are the vaguely defined people, and I used to be a nameless one among them. Accepting and accepted, they live with one another beneath the light. And whether it lasts forever or a moment, there must be a kind of closeness while they're enveloped in the light. I'm no longer one of them, however. They're up there on the face of the earth. I'm down here in the bottom of a well. They possess the light while I'm in the process of losing it. Sometimes I feel that I may never find my way back to that world, that I may never again be able to feel the peace of being enveloped in the light, that I may never again get to hold the cat's soft body in my arms. Then I feel a dull ache in my chest, as if something inside there is being squeezed to death. And I thought, yeah, that's a real place that we get drawn into, whether it's through illness, whether it's through sorrow, whether it's through terror, whether it's whatever it is that I've been drawn out of, whatever life I think that I had. And somehow, whatever the people are, feel far, the light feels far. And eventually he finds a guide, as one does. And this guide is pretty ill, but he seems to know quite a lot about this space. And he finally says to him, well, which one is better, above or below? And the guide says it's not that either one is better. It's not a question of better or worse. The point is not to resist the flow. You go up when you're supposed to go up, and down when you're supposed to go down. When you're supposed to go up, find the highest tower and climb to the top. When you're supposed to go down, find the deepest well and go down to the bottom. When there is no flow, stay still. If you resist the flow, everything dries up. If everything dries up, the world is darkness. Abandon the self, and there you are. And so he comes to make a home in this well, and somehow a door opens out of it in the end that leads him back to his life, but he's been changed in the process. And the place itself comes to be a kind of door to what, in a way, how the universe wants to come through him that he's been resisting, which is why everything's moving away from him. But as soon as he doesn't need to get away from himself, everything starts to open. And I'll read you a couple more things here. This one's called The Root Cellar. Go get some green beans, Grandma would say. Doom, fear, quick feet and hands, it always scared me. Damp dirt floors, musty darkness, hidden corners and spiders ready to pounce. A tomb. And yet, bursting with life. Plum jelly, green beans, tomatoes, jars of nourishment that took weeks of sweaty work to preserve. A garden of mummies. Go get me some stewed tomatoes, she would say. Once I tried to lie. I stood outside the door and seeing a menacing spider told her there weren't any. She wasn't fooled. She knew every jar the way a squirrel knows every nut he's stashed. How could you not when there are ravenous mouths to feed and you know how to take those bones and make them live again? The tomb, the resurrected garden, Grandma's only magic trick. And this is somehow, I don't know what happens when we sit. I don't know how. It's one of those interesting mysteries. It happens in life that when we can, it seems one of those interesting karmic things that wherever you think you can't possibly go, no matter what, that is where you will end up. We seek out these places. We seek out the very thing that we think we don't want or can't bear or don't have in us or whatever it is. And somehow it seems to want us to give up whatever we thought was required. We thought we had to be the hero or say the right thing or make someone feel better or get out of pain. And yet the more the silence and the stillness opens, the more everything is done for you. So I was listening to Jordan. Thank you, Jordan. Line from a different koan came into my mind about another koan about being trapped, where friends are trapped in the snow, but finally one says to the other, "Don't you know the family treasure doesn't come in through the gate? It comes out of your own breast and covers heaven and earth." That was sort of my feeling listening to Jordan. And deep down the well, deep down the crypt, the whole universe appears in a series of notes and feeling and no, I wondered, where are you, Jordan? Have anything to say about what you noticed as you were playing today?
Hmm. I guess when I started to play today, um, I sort of just feel into what's around, what I'm feeling, what I sort of pick up from looking at everybody. Uh, and the Crypt koan, sort of was feeling heavy for me. I could feel that weight of the stones above me. Um, so chords and notes that start to show up have um, that somehow is in those notes, and the chords kind of lead into uh, the feeling of heaviness and um, a little bit of sorrow, maybe loneliness. Uh, and then it's just a matter of getting out of the way as much as I can to let that do its thing. Um, and it just emerges. The koan's there. We're all there.
What did you notice happen to you as you were, how did your own state change as you let it pour out?
I can feel. Um, I have a funny experience sometimes when I play in this setting, and I've said this before, but the sometimes I finish and I think that's not how I would have done it. Is the only way I can say it, and you know when it's really there, I feel myself sort of flattened out, and the topography becomes the music and the notes, um, and it's I don't want to say that I'm not doing it, like, oh, the universe takes over and does it, but um, it does sort of become a collaboration between me and um, the sort of generative aspect of the universe. So there is a leaving behind of my own feelings of what I want to hear, what would be cool, what would be interesting, um, and just sort of uh, allowing more than trying to control. Uh, and that doesn't involve much of me, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to hear you talk about it, only because I'm aware every week it's almost like you become the voice of the koan response for the group. That I realize always something about my own um, state by listening, and then I'm different by the end in some way I can never predict. So I always just appreciate it. So it's nice to hear what it's like for you. Jesse, you have anything you want to say?
Sure. I was noticing. I'm in Laguna Beach now. We've completed our relocation to Southern California, and so I'm in a new room. That's the litter box behind me that we haven't found a place for yet. And but I'm in the room that will be my office, and so I kept opening my eyes just out of curiosity to see, where am I? So there's a sense of, what's the new crypt I'm in now? And there's a real feeling of being free here and being excited to go out into the world and try out new things. And I'm not a terribly like extroverted person. I don't like want to run out and meet a bunch of new people or something, but there is a feeling of being interested in going out into the world to see what's there and feeling free to do so. So in that way, I kind of feel less encrypted than I usually do. But I noticed this morning I took my son to the park to ride his bike before I came to do this, and I saw another father bringing his two kids to the park, and I watched the crypt build itself in that moment, and that was like the crypt of, protocol about, do I say hello? Do I stay quiet? Do I let them say hello? Do I go introduce myself? Do I stay, and how quickly that can build itself and feel like there is a right way to do this situation. And I think I've just been appreciating that, noticing how these little crypts, it's like I carry a little pocket crypt. It's like fits right in here somewhere, and then I'll just add one drop of water and it pops up wherever I am. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this situation, whatever it is. And so I'm kind of delighted that it's not showing up as much as I would expect, but it's still there, and kind of nice, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's what I got. Thank you. Thanks for stepping in today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's such an interesting. My mother-in-law told me this funny story. She's very claustrophobic, and when she was a little girl, she even remembered the guy's name, Gary. Somebody lured her into a doghouse and then closed her in. And she's, and for her entire life, she's 86. She still is not wanting that feeling of somehow being stuck. And yet, as you say, it's amazing how it finds us anyway. Christina Schmigel, you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, a lot of things have come up, but we went to the movies last night to see the new Wes Anderson movie, and before the movie started, there was 4 different previews: 2 about zombies, 2 about some unidentified crypt that I couldn't even place, and then Superman yet again. And I really had this feeling watching them of what's the koan, the collective, is trying to. It just felt like the previews were all carrying the same crypt in them, and that the collective is somehow needing to expose itself to these images in order to somehow find their way in the crypt. It was really striking to me. But the personal thing that the koan brings up for me, it's funny, only this time as it brought it up for me, was a time when I had a really bad accident. And I was really badly concussed for maybe 3 months or 4 months. And I had some severe damage in my jaw that meant that I couldn't open my mouth beyond the width of a straw. And I had to do these extremely painful exercises 3 times a day to try to open that out. It meant putting a kind of instrument in my mouth and really like medieval torture, forcing my mouth open. And I couldn't put anything together. Like things was very hard for me to process any kind of stimulation. My eyesight was off. And yet, in a weird way, when I think back on that time, or even in that time, the feeling of that there was an enormous freedom inside that time, because it might have been the one time during my life where I couldn't construct anything about myself. I just had to be with those circumstances that were right there. Like, there was no capacity to apply all the things, like Jesse was just describing, what's the right thing, what should I be doing, who should I be there for? Like, I'm living in a friend's house, like, should I be doing something to make up for the fact that I'm taking space? Just none of that existed. I just didn't have the capacity for it. And it was incredibly freeing. So in a kind of funny way, that time in the crypt was actually kind of a gift. It was kind of a really peaceful time. In some ways, like a lesson for where I'd like to be able to get myself to without having a concussion to get there. Because it was a kind of letting go of all that self stuff and just allowing to be in the current circumstances.
That's it. That's the spirit. Thank you. It's true. Illness does remarkably. Illness and, I guess in a way, being defeated, like the Buddha, are any good, but then blessings somehow appear in the quiet. I did want to say one last little thing, and then Amanda's going to give us some vows, which is the first thing Christina said. I've been noticing in the collective culture right now too, that almost no stories that have any kind of resolution. It's very interesting. Like, you can tell, or if they do, the resolution feels kind of cheap and forced and false or something like that. And given this koan, the nature of predicaments, that's just really interesting to me, because you can see that image hasn't arrived yet. It's still, we're in the predicament, we're in the jaws of the predicament, and that there's a way that then we learn to keep company with either false or forced or zombies or destitution or all these different things that we don't have to wait for a resolution, but somehow we know, there's still more at work. And I don't know, it seems it's a difficult time to trust the deep psyche of the collective, but somehow I do. Somehow I can feel the dream is still happening. So in the meantime, it's sure awfully nice to sit together. So thank you for being here.